Hello, everyone. My name's Dick. I don't even know where to start with my story. Anyway, I found out my sister's secret, and I still can't get over the shock. I hope that you'll watch my story to the end and write comments under the video. Watch, like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I have a sister. Her name is Haley. She's extremely kind and good. Haley was always responsive, and many people loved her for that. There was never a time when she didn't volunteer to help someone. Her parents managed to raise her like this. Maybe that's why she's always been surrounded by people like that. Haley had a lot of friends, but of course, there were those who were jealous that she was like this. Her best friend was Lilith. They had been friends since elementary school. I still remember Lilith coming to our house for a sleepover, and it happened often. Unfortunately, her family was not like ours. Haley said that Lilith often gets home from her mother and stepfather. My sister even said once that she felt that adults were deliberately bullying her. Haley felt sorry for her, and she loved her more than anyone, which is why she helped her in everything, including financial support. For me personally, Lilith was basically not bad, but this girl often got into bad situations. Always adventures found her, and along with this, my sister suffered. And no matter how much our mother forbade her to communicate with her, Haley still stood up for her friend. If I turn my back on her, she'll have no one left. I won't allow it, she said. One day, Lilith came to us in the middle of the night. She was crying. She was shaking all over. As it turned out, her stepfather and mother drank a lot and began to take it out on her. They told her a lot of nasty things and forced her to clean up after them, forced her to beg on the street and buy alcohol for them with this money. Haley repeatedly interfered in their family affairs. She demanded that they change, even threatening the police. But they didn't take her sister's words seriously. I understood that she was worried about her friend, but on the other hand, I was terribly annoyed that she was picking at the dirty laundry of her friend's family. And I kind of felt like one day their friendship was going to go sideways for Haley. It seemed to me that either she would have a bad influence on her sooner or later, or my sister would still get into specific trouble. And just a couple of months later, both happened. Our parents gave Haley a car. It was old, but it was still good. My sister was beside herself with happiness. I had persuaded them to give her such a gift for graduation. I felt that she deserved it, because for so many years, there was not a single comment or bad assessment in her address. Mom and Dad were proud of her, so they agreed. As soon as my sister successfully passed all the exams and entered college, she and her classmates decided to have a party in honor of it. I agree the occasion is gorgeous. Haley didn't really want to go there, but Lilith was upset about her mother again, and they persuaded her friends to get some air. My sister agreed. In general, that evening, they went to the party. They were gone for a very long time, and my mother was already beginning to worry. As the clock ticked past midnight, my mother started calling my sister, but she didn't answer the phone. It was strange because she had never been out so late before, and she had never ignored the phone calls. I felt anxious inside and couldn't sleep, and then I heard the front door open. Haley came into the house. Her face was gone, and she looked as pale as if she had seen a ghost. My mother and I were very scared. We started asking if everything was okay. I saw that something had happened, but she didn't tell me anything. She said that everything was fine and that she said she was tired, and then went to bed. We were supposed to go to the school the next morning. Haley woke up and didn't eat breakfast. As soon as we opened the door, we saw that the police were standing on the threshold. Haley looked nervous. The parents came out and they began to ask whose car was parked at the house. It was my sister's car. There was a dented bumper, and my father pretended to know that he had hit the car when he was driving into our garage. As proof, he showed a dent in the garage wall, which is already 4 years old. They apologized and left. It was clear that a serious conversation was waiting for them. But to a lot of questions, Haley just said that she had parked the car on the side of the road. Who dented her and when she didn't know. Because of this, I was afraid to go home yesterday. I'm terribly ashamed. I really didn't know how it happened, she said, and then began to cry. Her father and mother calmed her down, saying that the main thing was that no one was injured. I got in the car and we drove to school. She didn't say a word on the way. I asked her, but she said she didn't hear me. I asked the question again, and she seemed distracted from her thoughts. She said that everything was fine, gave me a strange smile, and continued driving. After a second, I realized I'd lost my phone, so I asked her to call mine. And when I picked it up, there was a message from Lilith. I still dream about yesterday's accident. I hope this man is alive. But what if he isn't? At the moment, I was paralyzed by terrible thoughts. Oh no, Haley hit a man, so the cops asked about the car. Then Haley said that the phone was lying under my feet. I handed her the phone and picked up mine. I was still replaying her friend's message in my head. She stopped in the parking lot and we went to class. I've been thinking about one thing all day. What if she knocked him to death? I have to tell my parents about everything, I thought. When I got home from class, Haley was already home. I went up to her and asked her directly, I know what happened yesterday. Don't you want to tell me anything? She suddenly jumped up from the sofa and began to justify herself. I didn't mean to. I didn't know this was going to happen. I didn't mean to. She cried in tears. My mother heard this and came up with the question, what didn't you want? The nurse hesitated and then said that she hit a man yesterday. What? And you're only telling me this now? My mother asked. Haley started crying, started making excuses. She said that Lilith called an ambulance, but she didn't know if this person was alive or not. My mother became hysterical. It was a long conversation. Then my mother got ready and went to the hospital to look for the victim. When we left the house, Lilith came up with us. She was also pale. When she found out we were going to the hospital, she tried to talk me out of it. Like, if he recognized Haley, the police would come. My mom said they needed to find out. Lilith came with us. Everyone was silent all the way, and there was tension in the car. Suddenly, Lilith asked, what if he was dead? My mother said sharply that it was necessary to sort everything out. She suddenly stopped in the middle of the road, turned to the girls, and demanded to know everything. Lilith was silent with her head down, and Haley told me that she'd had a few drinks yesterday and hadn't noticed anyone crossing the road. I saw him late, hit the brakes, and then I got scared and drove away, Haley said, wiping away tears. My mother was very angry. She started screaming in the car that she should have called her. I saw my sister crying. And if Dick hadn't found out, would you have kept quiet? What if that person was hurt very badly? What the hell were you thinking? When we finally arrived at the hospital and somehow found the man and my mother entered the room, they were met by policemen. The girls turned even paler. The policeman came up with the words, what are we doing here? After all, our father hit the car a long time ago. My mother was at a loss for an answer, and Haley confessed everything. She lowered her eyes and told us the same thing she had told us. We were in shock. The police officer said that you'd have to arrest her for driving under the influence, hitting a person, and fleeing the scene of the crime. My mom started begging me to talk about everything, and she started crying, and Haley didn't say anything, and I was terrified. A few minutes later, when she took his sister's arm and was about to lead her away, Lilith screamed that it was her. I shot it down. I asked for her car, not knowing how to drive. She stood up for me. She said and began to cry. The cop made a face. Where's the proof? He asked. Then the man came out of the room and he immediately pointed at Lilith. He had a bandaged hand. You were the one who hit me yesterday. I recognized you, he said, pointing at Lilith. Mom and I both breathed a sigh of relief. It was a good thing he only got off with a bruise. Oh, my sister was even willing to go to jail for her friend. Well, then there was a lot of trials, to be honest. I didn't think Haley was that kind. What would you do in her place?
Do you have a little brother or sister? How do you feel about them? Have you ever thought about what would happen if you were left alone without them? My name is Mark. I want to tell you about my sister, or rather, why I hated her. Usually, when another child is born in the family, it is groomed and cherished the most. And all because he is small. He is the youngest in the family, and accordingly, he needs more attention than the others. For me, it turned out very differently. When I was born, I wasn't the best. I didn't have any privileges. I didn't get snickered at. I didn't get more toys, and I didn't get more pocket money than my sister. She was more loved than I was. I had the feeling that she was younger than I was, although the age difference is 5 years. My sister's name is Alice. No, she's a good person and sometimes a good sister. Sometimes, when she was in a good mood, she would bring me home new toys, ice cream, or even give me money. But there were days when she looked awful and acted like a bitch. She could have thrown me out of the room and slammed the door in my face. I didn't understand why her parents didn't scold her at such times. Why did they punish me for any such outbursts? Was she on a special account? But why and how? I remember once I had a birthday, but my parents said that there was no money for the celebration. And I wanted this event so much. I waited a whole year to ask for a new skate as a gift. And then, such a bummer. Naturally, my mood fell. The next day passed as usual, and in the late afternoon, I noticed that my mother was packing a suitcase somewhere. When I asked where she was going, she said that she and Alice should go to another country, and then promised that they would return soon. What? Another country? But how? Why not me? Why her? Why does she always get the best of everything? So they don't have money for a new skate and cake, but they do have money to go to other countries? Why should I do all this? My heart was filled with hatred for Alice that night. I went to her bedroom, watched her pack her own things, and just silently hated her. I have often wondered why they should have another child if there is no place for it in their heart. This unloved, sometimes superfluous member of the family was me. As long as I can remember, I've been trying to figure out the secret of my sister's difference from me. And can everything be simpler? It's just that she's she and I'm I. This continued for several more years, and things got even worse. My parents almost stopped noticing me over the years. I was in the house like a shadow, and I had already learned not to talk to them much, and not to pay attention to the way they hung around this witch. I went to school, did my own homework, signed up for sports clubs, and made plans to get out of the house as soon as possible. Yes, I made a final decision for myself. They will be better off without me, or rather, they will not even notice my absence. I just needed to find a place to live and some part-time work for minors. I waited for the day when my mom and dad left on some business. They promised to return late at night. I picked up my duffel bag from under the bed and headed for the exit. As I was walking down the hall, Alice noticed me. "Hey Mark, where are you going?" she asked me. I was rude when I said it was none of her business. "What difference does it make? Do you care?" I shouted back. Alice made a surprised face, came up to me and asked why I was angry and rude to her. This question enraged me even more. I realized that the silence accumulated over the past months was about to tear me apart. And I gave in to emotions and I told my favorite parents everything I thought about my family. You ask why I'm angry? Because I don't exist in your fucking family. You live your own life. Parents have recently ceased to be interested in how I'm doing. You sit down to dinner separately, separate from me. When I get home, no one even yells, "Mark, hi, how you doing?" And no one asks me how I'm doing at school. Do any of you know that I'm captain of the high school basketball team? Did you know that I've been going to a music club for a year now and I've learned to play the guitar? Yes, I learned to cook food myself with the help of Google. And all because you are not near me. You then with your father, then with your mother, travel around the world, go to some countries and do not even tell where you rested? And I wasn't even taken once. And then you ask why I'm angry? Maybe because I'm not your family, I shouted. I was yelling so hard that I thought my lungs were going to explode from the strain. I blushed and my eyes were streaming with tears. The resentment I had accumulated over the years spoke to me. Alice just stood there looking at me and crying. She just said, "I'm sorry," in a low voice. "Is that all? I'm sorry?" I asked her. She roared louder than me, slammed the door to the room, and cried. I didn't know what was going on. It turns out that my parents were standing behind me. They looked very depressed. Mom was crying too, and then she and Dad took me to the kitchen. My father said they had a serious conversation for me. I was prepared to hear that I was not their own child, that they had taken me for a fool, and now they were sorry and I had to leave. "Your sister has cancer," my mother said. She wept even louder. Dad put his arm around her, but he didn't look up from the floor. At that moment, I felt sick. I was prepared for anything but this news. Suddenly, I felt hurt, ashamed, and angry at the same time. "She was diagnosed with the disease a couple months before you were born, and your dad and I threw all our energy into her treatment. Alice was looking forward to your birth. When you were in my tummy, she read you her favorite stories every day. In the countries we went to, she received chemotherapy, after which she was very ill for a while. She sometimes couldn't even walk on her own, so she often kept the door to her room closed or maliciously kicked you out. She just forbade us to tell you about it because she wanted you not to be sad," my mother said. Then she pointed out that she was very sorry for me because when they saved one child, they did not notice how they destroyed another, me. I don't think I felt any worse. You can't imagine how bad I felt at that moment. I thought of such terrible things. I hated Alice, and I did everything I could to offend her. I just looked at my parents and cried. My sister came up behind me and gave me a big hug. I couldn't say a word. She calmed me down and said it was all her own fault. I still love you, you stupid boy, she said, and laughed. That night, for the first time in my life, I had such a long, open, honest, and frank conversation. All I asked was that you let me take care of her. Now, in all her chemo sessions, I was there for her, feeding her, reading her books, playing the guitar, singing songs. A few more years passed. Alice still has to undergo intensive treatment, but I'm happier than ever because I can be near my sister, whom I love more than anyone in the world.